Hi, welcome to Money Talks, the Journal Times online business show. I'm business reporter Michael Burke, and today we're going to be talking about Racine's urban river corridor with Ben Lehner, outreach. What do you call yourself?
Outreach coordinator.
Outreach coordinator with the Root River Council, and Corey Mason, State Representative Corey Mason, who's very involved, and I know you have been from the beginning with this. The document called Rootworks is a 33-page, really professionally done, really great looking, well written blueprint for the redevelopment of the part of Root River we're going to be talking about today, which is the part closest to downtown and kind of a forgotten area. And by the way, it has city approval, which is an important point we're going to be talking about. And let's mention, if anybody is seeing this show before Wednesday, December 12th, 5 p.m., they have an opportunity to see what we're going to be talking about and really see it in some detail and make comments. So where's that going to happen?
So it'll be at our office tonight, which is at 524 Monument Square, Suite 100. It's right there on Monument Square. And we'll be talking about trying to implement one of the first pieces of the plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How did you guys each get involved in this effort to really focus on this old part of Root River and do something great with it to bring back industry and business and enliven it? Corey, why don't you start? I know you've been on this from day one.
Yeah, it was 2005, and I was both on the board of the River Alliance of Wisconsin and a commissioner on the city's redevelopment authority at the time. And the River Alliance, which was sort of known for preserving wild and scenic rivers up north, started thinking about the fact that, most people who live on or near rivers are actually in cities, and what are we doing about those rivers?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the Redevelopment Authority started looking at some of the development opportunities that were in the city, and I sort of said, well, why don't we bring these two together and really talk about redeveloping our river? We've got a great opportunity that could really be seized if we brought people together.
Yeah. How about you, Ben? When did you get started and why?
Well, I originally got involved with the Root River Council when I was working with UW Parkside's Rec Center as an AmeriCorps Vista. And
You were the director of that for a while.
yeah, I kind of helped
Yeah.
help get things off the ground there, and I've since been engaged in river activities. I guess I'm a big Root River enthusiast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how many people would you say have contributed, have shown up at meetings, have voiced comments, or been involved in any way?
Hundreds. I mean, we have people sign in at every meeting. We had a series of meetings in 2008. We did another series of meetings in 2011 and 2012. We've had, just in the last year, this will be I believe our 8th public meeting this evening. So we've really been lucky to have a broad base of voices and contributions from people around the city and in different parts of the community saying, this is what we think, and really have improved the plan as a result.
And this document, Rootworks, obviously coalesces all of those things that you've heard and the best thinking. What's the area we're talking about? Let's give some rough boundaries to it.
It's roughly that railroad bridge that crosses near South Memorial there,
Mm-hmm.
to the mouth of the river. So really we're talking about the old industrial corridor
Mm-hmm.
of the Root River. Anything sort of further upstream, it's all those great parks that the city has. But from basically the South Memorial downstream, we've sort of forgotten about the Root River. It was once a burgeoning area of industry and jobs and innovation, and served the community well with Case Tractors and Massey Ferguson and Walker Muffler and Golden Books, all being produced right in that region. But as we've pivoted out of sort of our manufacturing heyday, we've got to think about how to restructure that land.
Yeah. And of course, let's not forget the reason manufacturing happened on the edge of rivers back in the day was it was an easy way to get rid of the stuff,
Right.
the byproducts of manufacturing.
You were either moving goods out or moving waste out.
Yeah, yeah. And why focus on the area? You mentioned it's rather forgotten, rather neglected. We've got enormous former Western Publishing buildings right down on the river on Water Street that are used for nothing but what we call cold storage. In other words, it's basically unheated warehouse space. Tremendous underuse of those properties. But is that the reason, or what's the reason where this plan is really looking at this area?
Yeah, I mean, it presents a number of opportunities. So the city is now landlocked with the villages around it. So if we're going to redevelop and have a real chance for economic development, you've got to look at where can you redevelop within your current boundaries, right? So the study area that we're looking at is over 250 acres of land that could be redeveloped. So it creates this great opportunity for redevelopment that's there that we really, if we put a plan together, could seize upon. And
Because where else is the city going to put new industry other than maybe the Southside Industrial Park?
right, and the city's also done great work in the last generation in redeveloping its lakefront, in redeveloping Main Street in the downtown. It's a natural next step to say, we need to remember our river too. And if you look at communities that have rivers, even communities that are on the Great Lakes, they celebrate their rivers much more in an urban setting than we have. So it's a real great opportunity for us to do that as well.
Not to mention, you compare the idea of an industrial park, and that's suitable for certain businesses, but it doesn't have the possible lure of a river and all the things that can come with that. What are some of the main obstacles when you look at this area to enlivening it, to bringing business and people and activities? Ben, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the obstacles that we've been dealing with is honestly a little bit of the public perception of the river itself. And so one of the methods that we've been using is just getting people out on the water, getting people walking along the Root River pathway, exploring the parks. And it sounds pretty trivial, but it's got a pretty powerful effect. I think...
So perception is one thing you need to get over.
It is, yeah. And I mean, and honestly, when people go out on the river, you return changed. I mean, your perception of the area, I like to say it's kind of our wilderness. It's a vantage point of Racine that is completely unique, and it should be, I guess, celebrated is the right word.
And I've done that. You're right. The perception is entirely different. Like your rec center, I've taken canoes out from there before, and you look at things from there that you've seen from the street level, and everything looks completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, it would be behoove us to not also mention an obvious obstacle, which is perhaps the economic times that we're dealing with. What that does allow, though, is an opportunity to do all the planning work and get kind of that foundation in, so that when things are ready, then we're ready to move on the plan.
What are some other obstacles?
Well, you hear, we talked about, we have 4 goals with this plan that is out there. 2 of them are creating a sense of place and improving public access. And honestly, those sound like simple things, but here we are in the Journal-Times office, and almost nobody realizes when they drive by that they are a block away from the river. I mean, it's physically hard to see in the downtown area. So part of
or
it is...
get to, even if you notice
Right. It's hard to know if you're allowed to get there by car or by foot or on a bicycle. So even just, creating this area that's sort of known as sort of this Root Works downtown river district can go a long way to just, making people aware that, hey, there's this real asset that's there. And then that public access piece and having ways for people to get down there and celebrate it and have public space to really encourage the private development are there. Other obstacles are, these were former industrial properties, right?
Right, exactly.
And so there's some challenge in that these are, some brownfields, some of which have been remediated, some of which may still need to be remediated for future use. And these were all, former factories that, used some heavy metals and other things that are possibly
it's a whole different ballgame than
Right.
just going onto a piece of green land and you build what you want to build.
That's right.
Completely different.
But the advantage we have is we're right near the downtown, very close to the lake with access to water and on a river. So there's a real incentive to redevelop that land as opposed to some other, factory site somewhere else in the city.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things the plan did was take this broader area and kind of form certain zones to focus on. Why don't you show us those redevelopment zones that have been identified? And you may need to lift that just a little bit as you talk about it, get it over the table level.
So
that's probably good there.
Right. So what we did is when you look at sort of the shaded area, the whole area is about it's more than 250 acres, so it's a large site.
Actually, I believe it's 350 according to the plan.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, over 350. So it's a lot of space, and trying to say that we're going to do it all at once is maybe a little bit too unrealistic. So what we did is we broke it down into 5 zones that you could really encourage for redevelopment. One is this Walker site redevelopment, which is where the Walker muffler site used to be. The other is the Bell Harbor district, which
And that would be just immediately
Right.
north of most
Right.
of downtown.
That's right, and right next to the Main Street Bridge. It's a great development opportunity. The other is the CNH downtown Riverfront campus that's being used very well now, but could conceivably see additional growth. And then the fourth is this Machinery Row area, which we're very excited. This is the row of factories that used to be used as almost as an assembly line to construct tractors here many years ago that still have some great buildings that could be redeveloped.
Why don't you show where Water Street is
Right,
and then roughly where City Hall is in case
Right, so
people
here-
don't have their bearings.
Right, so here's Water Street right here, and then City Hall is right here.
Okay.
And strangely, it only looks like it's a block away, but there's quite a hill there. So
Right,
people
right.
sort of miss, it's easy to miss as you're sort of driving by. And then lastly is the transit-oriented development district, which is the site of the former Western Publishing and now home to 21st Century Prep and some daycare facility and serves as a business incubator. And it's also where our transit site is. It's where the big bus transit center is. So there's real opportunity to look at these separately and come up with good plans that would encourage development in each of these areas.
Okay. Well, you guys can set that down if you like, and then let's talk about the one because your plan identifies Machinery Row in particular as a real catalyst area, real area of at least initial focus. So let's talk about that some more. And first of all, why do you think that can be a catalyst for this?
Yeah, I mean, just from what we've seen in other communities, there's a real value in redeveloping old historic buildings. You look at them now and they sort of have these battleship gray siding on them. But if you were to remove some of that siding and look at the inside, they have beautiful old wood timbers, gorgeous brickwork that's in there. And we know from other communities that, young professionals love to live in buildings that have been, redeveloped and turned into either condos or apartments or to either work or live in that space.
Like the Mitchell Wagon Factory and like
Very
the
similar.
The name is escaping me at Marquette and 6th Street. What are those
the
called?
the Riverbend Lofts.
Riverbend Lofts,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a very similar vintage of building, very similar style.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity there to embrace that, and these are buildings that, unlike those other two, are actually right on the river.
Right.
And, Riverbend comes close, but these are buildings that are right on the river that have a great vantage that you could really, seize and do something unique with. So it seems, from a marketing perspective and an implementation perspective, the place that we have the best opportunity to start. Now, having said that, if any developer came to town and said, I'm much more interested in this other site, we're happy to work with them. But,
Sure.
but we think for now that's the site that's most likely to yield the best possible redevelopment first.
Okay, so what are some of the ways then that this plan is encouraging development in that area?
Yeah, so you want to go to the next map, do you think, or do you want to stay here for?
Sure, you can if that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
I think so much of this is doing things in tandem. So what we've seen from other communities that have their riverfronts redeveloped is
Do you guys want to pick that up just a little bit?
is none of them happen by accident.
Yeah.
They all developed a plan that was embraced by their city and then implemented. And so there's a public-private partnership that's going to have to occur here. And so what we're doing to convince private investors that it will be worth acquiring some of this land is we're putting in public space and public amenities that would make a developer believe that people are going to be down there and want to shop there or live there or work there. So there's the real possibility of doing that. So what we've talked about doing are a couple things. One is developing sort of a river loop on both sides of the river that would come up Water Street and putting in a riverfront promenade here, which would basically be a bike path plus some additional public space so that you could have a farmer's market or an art festival or something else to bring people down there. So again, that retailers would want to be there, people would want to live there, people would want to work there.
By the way, define the loop. When you say loop, are you talking about a walking, driving, bicycling path? What is it exactly?
Yeah, we're talking about trying to create a bicycle/pedestrian path that would continue the path that goes up if you go upstream in the parks, there's a great path that runs through there that bicycles and pedestrians can use. We'd like to continue that through this downtown area. And so these double orange lines, these dotted orange lines, we're talking about putting paint on the street and then bringing as much of the bike path down to the river as we can, and then adding the promenade on as an opportunity for bicycles and pedestrians to come through for events, and really creating a sense of space for the public to use it, enjoy it, and make a private developer say, hey, there's people who come down here. There's people who'd like to shop and live here. This is a place that's worth me investing. Yeah,
and speaking of connections, your previous visual showed that there were a couple streets you're talking about putting in there too. Ben, do you want to kind of point where those would be?
Sure. So some of the proposed or reintroduction of the streets actually are basically here along the west side of the large warehouse facility here, as well as continuing Center Street to the river's edge. And the advantage.
Yes, those are pretty good distances in there, aren't they?
Those are a couple city blocks.
Yeah.
And I mean, the advantage of that is then it offers more retail frontage or street frontage, and much like the River Promenade or the River Loop offers more frontage, like publicly used frontage for redevelopment or retail purposes.
We should probably mention at this point another. We're going to get back to connections in a second, but another mechanism here is by the city approving this plan, there was also a zoning change with that, right? Do you want to explain that?
Correct.
And what that does?
So the city adopted two changes this summer as it relates to the Route Works plan. The first was they adopted it into the city's master plan and said this is how we'd like to see development occur. But as importantly, they amended their downtown zoning ordinance to reflect the recommendations made here in terms of public right-of-way and access, and really changed it from an area that for decades has been zoned solely for heavy industrial use. It can now be used for a wider variety of development opportunities. So now the opportunity for residential or retail or commercial or industrial exist in this area, where for decades, really, unless you had an idea for heavy industry, that was really your only option here.
Yeah, so now you could say, you could put the kind of loft living in there or something like that.
Right.
You could build retail shops in this area if you guys can show there's the human activity and things like that. Speaking of connections, Ben, there are a couple other really interesting ones that you guys are talking about from Mound Avenue. Do you want to show where Mound Avenue is on there?
Sure. So right here is Mound Avenue. It connects 6th Street to Marquette Street.
And talk about a couple of the proposals for getting people from the west into this area more easily by bicycle, by foot, things like that.
Well, some of the things that we're actually just in this schematic design right now, just entering the conversation, and that we're hoping to get a lot of feedback from, is creating a bike boulevard along Mound Avenue, essentially identifying it as a shared space, a shared road. The advantage of that is that it slows traffic down for it is a school zone. It's 21st century. There's also a daycare, and it also creates a safe connection along the Root River pathway for people and families on their bicycles. Some of the other proposals for access are basically street crossings on Marquette, creating good signage and paint on the streets, crosswalks, and things like that. And we've also there's been right now there's a proposal essentially to create connections across the river. So a connection underneath 6th Street, which would be what's called a marsupial bridge, which does not necessarily involve kangaroos, but it is.
But it could.
Yeah, it could, exactly. And that would be a continuation of the Root River pathway to take the path to this east or south side of the river.
So explain a marsupial bridge. It's a novel term for a lot of people. What is it? How does that work exactly? It's a bridge. It's a bridge that hangs beneath a bridge, right? First of all.
Yeah. So it's using an existing structure, existing footings to create basically another bridge underneath. And a prime example of that is what Milwaukee's done real well with the Brewer Hill district over by
that's near
Lakefront Brewery.
Brady Street, right?
Right. Yep. By Brady Street, and they've got this great pedestrian pathway that is using. It's probably very cost efficient to cross a large valley using existing footings, and we've got a great opportunity here on 6th Street because we have footings in place, there is the clearance, and there's also the added advantage of not having to do a change in grade, basically like on a bicycle, climbing a hill up to Mount Avenue, crossing over and then dropping down. If you're trying to get to downtown, you've got your family with, you've got a kid in the cart and a 6-year-old on a bicycle, you don't have to climb this large hill, you can stay at grade along the
Basically,
river.
you just slip underneath the bridge and then you slip up onto at grade level again, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity. It also opens up opportunities for property owners and future redevelopment further upstream from, say, a crossing at Marquette Street, because then it allows, again, that expansion of use.
Yeah. Obviously, that's going to be a new structure. Those things are costly. Let's just stop and talk right now a little bit about where would the money come. That's probably about the most expensive public infrastructure piece in this, isn't it? Or not?
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I think it's too early to say that. I mean, there's brownfield redevelopment and other things that could.
Okay.
But what's great about the Marsupial Bridge idea is instead of creating a whole other bridge and putting in footings and having to figure out how to span the river, we're using the bridge that's already there and sort of piggybacking on that infrastructure. So all you're really doing is putting down.
But where might the money come from, whether it be for the Marsupial Bridge or a pedestrian bridge or any of these infrastructure changes you're talking about?
Yeah, so I anticipate we would apply for the same funding sources that the city currently used to do the Lake Michigan pathway and the upstream through what's called federal MCAT DOT money for pathways. They have to be a certain width and ADA compliant, but
That's for example, what did the improvement past the North Beach Oasis, right?
That's right.
That whole part of the.
That's right. So everything that sort of runs, in front of the zoo there, north there, and down here. That was and what we did upstream. We also used some stewardship dollars to do some land acquisition. So we anticipate using those same state and federal sources to fund these kind of programs as well. And what we heard from people when we first started having these conversations over and over again is, how come there's these great paths on the lake, and then once you get, into the parks, there's these great paths. Why isn't there a connection? Why is it so much harder for me to why can't I ride along the river the whole way through? And so that's really the first call for public access we heard from. So we're trying to respond to that request and make that real.
Let's try to talk just for a minute or two about each of those other zones. If you want to show the previous chart, is it possible to get that back up there? Or, hold it up again? Maybe just start with Bell Harbor. What are some of the ideas in the plan for the Bell Harbor district, which has been a boat storage area, but that's no longer necessary?
Right. The interesting thing about it is the county recently acquired the Bell Harbor district, so it's publicly
and is trying to decide what to do
and is
with it.
trying to figure out how to redevelop it. It's like many of the things here. It raises a lot of questions, but presents enormous opportunities. So it is a 14 to 15 acre site just by the Main Street Bridge there, with a lot of boat traffic that comes in and out here, and you've got a harbor that before we did the Reef Point Marina downtown here, got an awful lot of use, but since that time, sits empty for most of the summer, and those slips really aren't sold anymore. And so, for Bell Harbor, and because those walls are really starting to deteriorate, you really have to decide: do we want to rebuild this as a harbor, or should it be filled in and maybe add some additional land to the downtown for redevelopment for some other use? And those are big questions that we still have to answer and get tons of regulatory questions answered with DNR and Commerce and the Harbor Master and all those things.
But certainly prime real estate.
But certainly, to have a 15-acre site right on the Main Street Bridge, a stone's
right
throw
on the
from
bed.
Lake,
look at all the riverfront access there.
That's right. The stone's throw from Lake Michigan is a real opportunity. So we think that there's some work that can be done there that would be very exciting.
Walker said redevelopment. That, of course, is the would-be long-lamented Point Blue, which kind of went away with the recession.
That's right.
That was going to be an enormous mixed-use development. Are there any particular ideas in the plan, or is it kind of wide open?
It's still wide open. There's some brownfield work that needs to be done on that site. Again, it was a muffler site, so for years there was some issues there that need to be addressed. It was actually the city approached me a couple years ago about could we pass a bill through the legislature that would extend the life of the TIF that this is in, to provide funding to do that. So there is a city TIF that's working on redeveloping that site, that extended it for 10 years, and I believe we're in the third year of that. And the city's used that money quite wisely to figure out how to remediate it so it would be available for redevelopment. It is one of the biggest undeveloped sites on Lake Michigan between Milwaukee and Chicago. And perhaps the only one that's bigger is the old Case plant just south of the city.
Right.
But
What is the
enormous
acreage there?
opportunity.
Do you guys have to recall?
This site is
Something like 8 acres or 9 acres?
no, I think it's larger than this.
Oh,
Is
is it?
14 here.
Oh,
So
okay.
I believe
Oh,
it's
that's much larger.
some 30 acres
Oh, all right.
that are available for redevelopment. So, enormous opportunities there as well, and questions about do you bring the street back through, or what would it look like? And I think the city is wisely trying to figure out how to remediate it and prepare it for potential development before it's really thinking about implementing it, which is why we've sort of talked about Machinery Row and Bell Harbor as areas that might pop first before the other two.
Real briefly there's an intriguing one right in the middle there, the CNH Riverfront Campus. Of course, that's all privately owned land.
Right.
It's an inactive use. What are the thoughts on that?
And these are thoughts, but as you're looking for undeveloped and usable land that could be developed in the city, initially, I'm told in the 80s when Case proposed this site, they were going to build 2 additional buildings. And so when you look at the land that's down there, there's a lot of unused space there that could conceivably be used. We haven't had very firm conversations with CNH about what that would look like, but we would be remiss if we didn't mention these 2 very large spaces of empty space that are right here for downtown that can be redeveloped.
Okay. And then lastly, we have the transit district. Ben, what are those bordering streets, and what are the thoughts on that?
Well, we've got Memorial Street here and State Street. This leads into Northwestern Avenue. It's basically the site where the transit center is now. Also, some other retail areas in the area, and of course the Mount Avenue Business Center, which is a great business incubator and houses some charter schools.
But of course, the city has been wanting to develop the whole State Street corridor, and some success, but not a lot, for at least a decade. So is anything different now in the current thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we try to do with all this river property is get people to think not only about their street frontage, but their river frontage, right? So if we're going to have some redevelopment here, we want people to use the opportunity that the river presents to market not only State Street traffic, but what could come along on the riverfront as well.
Okay, yeah. Well, you guys are going to be talking about all this again and showing all of this again. For those who are seeing this show on Wednesday, December 12th, starting at 5 p.m. from about 5 to 7, the Root River Council and both of these gents will be talking about all of these things, and the public will have an opportunity for comment. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, if you're seeing the show later, just watch to see what happens, because there's a lot of exciting ideas here about enlivening. Downtown is not the same place, as you alluded to. It's not the same place it was 20 years ago, and things do change. Things can change when you really put the focus on them, when you put a lot of good brain power to work. So it'll be exciting to watch and see. You've been watching Money Talks with my guest today, Representative Corey Mason and Ben Lehner, both with the Root River Council, and talking about the RootWorks plan for the Racine Urban Corridor. Thanks to our producer today, Gregory Shaver, and I'm business reporter Michael Burke. Thanks a lot, and please join us again.